Hi, I'm Jo from the Central Scotland School of Jewellery, and we're here to help you on your jewellery journey. And today we need to talk about buff sticks. So what is a buff stick? Essentially, a buff stick is just a piece of doweling wrapped in sandpaper. Why is it good? Well, when we've already talked about sawing out a piece, and we've talked about how filing cleans up the saw marks. But what about the file marks? We also need to clean up the file marks off the edge of your piece, and that's where a buff stick comes in. So a buff stick, sandpaper comes in different grits, and what you want to do is start with a really rough grit. And one of the great things about a buff stick is it has this wooden core, and because it has that kind of strength, it's so much more effective than just a piece of sandpaper. So keeping your piece again down on your bench peg for extra resistance, you can use this buff stick to start cleaning up any marks that your file may have left. So with a low grade of sandpaper, I'll work all the way around my piece before swapping my buff stick for a finer grade of sandpaper, and I might repeat that through 8 or 9 different grades of sandpaper. Now in our classes, especially some of the weekend workshops when time is tight, we have these other tools called a FlexiFile. What's interesting about the FlexiFile is that it has 4 different grits on one little stick. The dark gray is the roughest. You would move then to the pink, followed by the white, and you would end on the light gray. It's kind of gray to gray. And you would use them in exactly the same way as your buff stick, simply starting with the roughest one, working your way around the piece. And you might notice that I'm using the same motion that I used when I was filing. With filing, it's important that you push and lift your file because it only cuts in one direction. Now this isn't true of buff sticks, they work in all directions, but I just think it's a good habit to get into because it'll make sure when you do file, you're filing properly. Now, the downside of these FlexiFiles is, unfortunately, they wear out very, very quickly, and then they have to be disposed of, which is quite wasteful. We do recycle them here at the school, but they are so short-lived. So what I'd like to show you today is how to make your own buff sticks. All you need is some sandpaper in a variety of grits. It should tell you on the reverse what the grit is. I've got some P400 here, which is a medium roughness, a piece of doweling, and a Pritt stick. Just apply a liberal amount of Pritt stick to the sandpaper. I would normally make up buff sticks in every grade of sandpaper, so I had them to hand. And it's not that you have to always have a rectangular buff stick. You could certainly choose another shape of doweling. You could use a half circle or a triangle if that's going to help you access the areas of your piece that need to be finished up. I'm going to use a really liberal amount of Pritt stick on the back of the sandpaper. Okay, I'm gonna lay my piece of doweling down to the first edge, get it lined up with the far edge, and then I use the reverse side of a craft knife just to score the paper. I don't want to cut through it, I just want to score it so that I'll get a nice crisp fold. There we go, there's one. I'm gonna score it again with the back end of the craft knife. There's a second fold. Lastly, I'm just going to cut straight through the sandpaper this time. There we go. Now the glue is going to take a minute or 2 to dry, so sometimes a couple of elastic bands just while it's drying help keep it all together. And the other thing you'll need to remember to do is to write the sandpaper grit on the bottom of your stick so you're able to identify it later. So I'll write 400 on the bottom. So it is just that simple, and the beauty of this buff stick is that once the sandpaper is all worn out and done, you can simply soak this in a jar of water, the sandpaper and the glue will fall right off, and you can start again.